to Deep Sleep Stories. Thank you to everyone who's been listening. If these stories help you relax or fall asleep, a short review, comment, or sharing the podcast with someone who might benefit is a simple and meaningful way to support the show so that we may continue to offer it for free. Now, take a slow, gentle breath and let's begin tonight's story.
Welcome to Deep Sleep Stories, where you can let the day soften at the edges and drift into a quiet night. Tonight, you'll be carried to a wide meadow where green tea is brewed slowly in the open air, and the simple ritual becomes a gentle kind of magic. Settle in just as you are. Let your shoulders sink a little as if a warm blanket has been placed over them. Let your jaw unclench. Let your tongue rest easily in your mouth. If your eyes want to close, allow them. If they want to flutter a while longer, that's all right too. Breathe in slowly, as if you're drawing in a clean, cool evening breeze. And breathe out gently, like you're letting a candle's flame dance without going out. Again, a soft breath in, and an even softer breath out. As you listen, imagine that the room around you grows quieter, not because anything changes, but because you no longer need to chase every sound, every thought, every little tug of attention. They can pass by like clouds. You do not have to hold them. In your mind, you begin to sense a place that feels safe and wide and open. A meadow washed in a tender twilight. Tall grasses ripple like slow water. Wildflowers fold and unfold in the breeze, releasing faint sweetness into the air. Somewhere nearby, green tea waits to be prepared. Warm, fragrant, soothing, its steam drifting upward like a lullaby. With each breath, you move a little closer to that meadow. With each exhale, the day loosens its grip. And now, without effort, without needing to do anything at all, the story can step forward and carry you the rest of the way. There was a meadow that did not belong to anyone's season, though it welcomed them all. In spring, it wore pale green like a new thought, tender and shy. In summer, it shimmered with sunlight and the busy hum of bees. In autumn, it turned to amber and copper, full of seed heads and soft goodbyes. In winter, it slept under moonlit frost, quiet as a held breath. But most often it was seen in the hour between day and night, when the sky was neither bright nor dark, and the world seemed to float for a moment, unclaimed by hurry. On the edge of this meadow stood a small, weathered gate made of smooth wood. The latch was simple, the hinges never creaked. The gate opened as if it had been waiting. Past the gate, a narrow path wound through the grasses, pressed down by years of gentle footsteps. The grasses leaned in, brushing against travelers with a soft, shushing sound, as if reminding them to speak quietly here, and to move slowly. Near the center of the meadow, where the land dipped slightly like a shallow bowl, a circle of stones rested in a calm arrangement. They were not stacked, and they were not sharp. Each stone looked as if it had chosen its own place and settled there with contentment. Within that circle of stones sat a flat slab of pale rock, warmed by the last memory of sunlight, and on that slab, as if it had always belonged there, was a small tray holding a clay teapot, 2 cups, and a simple tin of green tea leaves. No one could say who had first placed those things there. Some believed it was a wandering herbalist long ago who had found the meadow and felt the need to offer something gentle to it. Others thought it had been left by a caretaker of dreams, someone who tended quiet places the way gardeners tended roses. The meadow, for its part, never explained. It only continued, breathing in the breeze, gathering dew, opening its flowers, and waiting with patient kindness. On a certain evening, when the sky was brushed with lavender and the first star blinked awake, a traveler found the gate. The traveler was not hurried. Their steps were unforced, their mind a little tired in the way minds can be when they have carried too much noise. They had walked a long time without quite meaning to, following the subtle tug of something restful. Not a voice exactly, not a command, more like the memory of peace. They pushed the gate open with one hand. It swung inward as smoothly as a sigh. As the traveler stepped onto the path, the meadow welcomed them in quiet ways. The air cooled their skin with a sweet freshness. The scent of wild mint rose gently when their feet brushed the leaves along the path. Tiny moths drifted in slow loops above the grass, like pale petals that had forgotten how to fall. Each step seemed to lighten something inside them. They came to the circle of stones, and there, on the flat slab, they saw the tea set waiting as if it had been prepared for them alone. They stood for a moment without touching anything. In the meadow, the smallest sounds were clear. A cricket's rhythm, the soft clicking of a beetle moving through grass, the delicate whisper of distant leaves. The traveler breathed, and their breath felt different here. It slowed by itself as if it had been searching all day for a place to do exactly that. Beside the stone circle, half hidden in tall grass, a small spring bubbled up from the earth. Its water was clear as glass, and it sang a thin, bright song that blended with the rest of the meadow's hush. The traveler knelt by the spring and dipped their hands into the water. It was cool, but not cold, refreshing, like the first sip of something pure. They let the water run over their fingers and wrists, and for a moment the simple sensation was enough to fill the whole mind. When they rose and returned to the stone slab, they saw something else, something they hadn't noticed at first. A tiny kettle made of dark metal sat near the tray. It was plain, but it caught the last light of the sky and held it like a small secret. The traveler lifted the kettle. It was light, empty, ready. They carried it to the spring, filled it with clear water, and returned to the stone circle. Then they paused again, uncertain. There was no firewood stacked neatly, no matches, no sign of how the kettle was meant to warm. And yet, as the traveler held still, they felt the air around them change, only slightly, like a curtain stirred by a breath. A warmth gathered near the stones. Not hot, not sharp. A steady, gentle warmth, like the warmth of hands held near one another. The traveler set the kettle on a flat stone in the center of the circle. The warmth deepened, as if the stones remembered how to do this, as if they had done it for countless evenings, for countless tired minds. A few moments passed, and the kettle began to hum faintly, not loudly, not urgently, just a subtle vibration, like a purring cat, like a song remembered under the breath. The traveler watched, and their thoughts slowed into the same quiet rhythm. Around them, the meadow settled further into evening. The sky darkened a shade at a time. The first star brightened, then another, until the sky was dotted with soft lights, as if someone had scattered silver seeds across velvet. When the kettle's hum changed, just a little higher, just a little brighter, the traveler knew it was ready. They lifted it carefully. The handle was warm, not burning. The metal seemed to hold heat, the way the meadow held calm, with ease. They placed it beside the tray and opened the tin of green tea. Inside were curled leaves, deep green with hints of jade, like tiny folded wings. The scent rose immediately, fresh and grassy, with a note of sweetness that felt clean and hopeful. The traveler inhaled, and something in their chest loosened, not dramatically, not all at once, just a soft shift, like a knot untying itself in the dark. They took the teapot and warmed it with a small pour of hot water, then emptied it onto the grass. The grass drank it without complaint. The earth seemed grateful. Then, with careful fingers, they placed a pinch of green tea leaves into the pot. They did not measure. They did not worry. They simply listened to the quiet feeling of enough. The traveler poured the hot water over the leaves. At once the aroma rose, soft, vegetal, slightly sweet, like the color green translated into scent. Steam curled upward and vanished into the night, leaving behind warmth and comfort. As the tea steeped, the traveler waited, hands resting in their lap. In the meadow, waiting was not an empty thing. It was its own gentle activity. The traveler noticed how the grasses moved like one slow creature, how the wildflowers, now closing, seemed to tuck themselves in, how the moths drifted closer to the circle of stones, attracted by warmth and calm rather than flame. The traveler listened to the spring's song and found it steadier than their thoughts had been all day. They listened until their thoughts began to match it, stream-like and smooth. When the moment felt right, the traveler poured the tea into one cup, then the other. The liquid was pale gold with a faint green hue, like sunlight filtered through leaves. They lifted the first cup and took a sip. The tea was warm without being too hot. Its flavor was delicate. Fresh grass, spring rain, a whisper of sweetness, and a pleasant, gentle bitterness that reminded the tongue it was awake even as the mind was drifting. The traveler let the tea rest on their palate, then swallowed slowly. The warmth traveled downward, spreading through the chest and into the belly like a small, steady lantern. They took another sip, then set the cup down. Only then did they realize something curious. There were 2 cups. The traveler was alone. And yet the second cup was there, as if it belonged to someone who might arrive any moment, or as if the meadow itself intended to share. The traveler looked out across the grasses. In the distance near the gate, a faint glow moved, soft, bluish, like moonlight, concentrated into a small wandering spark. It drifted closer, not fast, not erratic, calmly, as if it had all the time in the world. The traveler watched without fear. The meadow did not feel like a place where fear belonged. The glow drew nearer and resolved into something like a figure, though not fully solid. It was as if the air had taken on a shape. A small person made of light and shadow, wearing a cloak that shimmered with the colors of twilight. The figure stepped into the circle of stones and paused. Its face was gentle, not clearly defined, like a dream you recognize without needing to see every detail. It inclined its head toward the traveler, a greeting that was quiet and respectful. The traveler, feeling strangely certain of what to do, returned the greeting with a small nod. The figure moved to the stone slab and lifted the second cup. It did so with delicate care, as if honoring the ritual. Then it sat, cross-legged in the grass, just beyond the stones, close enough to share warmth, far enough to feel like its own presence. For a while, neither spoke. The meadow did not require conversation. It welcomed silence, the way the ocean welcomed the moon. The travelers sipped their tea again. The figure sipped as well, though the tea seemed to glow faintly as it touched the figure's lips, as if light was drinking light. A breeze moved through the meadow, and the figure's cloak fluttered softly. In the flutter, the traveler caught glimpses of tiny stitched patterns, leaves, stars, spirals, little symbols that looked like gentle reminders. The traveler's tired mind wanted to ask questions. Who are you? What is this place? Why does it feel like it has been waiting for me? But the questions did not press forward. They arrived and then drifted away, as if they, too, were ready to rest. Instead, the traveler simply watched the steam rise from the tea. The figure lifted one hand and, with a slow motion, traced a small circle in the air above the stones. The air shimmered, not brightly, just a little, like a ripple on water. And in that shimmer, the traveler saw something that felt like a memory, though it was not their own. They saw someone, perhaps a different traveler on a different evening, arriving at the meadow with heavy steps. They saw that traveler kneel by the spring, fill the kettle, make the tea, sip slowly, and gradually soften into peace. The shimmer changed again. Another traveler, another evening, the same simple ritual, the same gentle settling. It was as if the meadow kept a quiet record, not of names or stories, but of moments when someone had come here to rest. The figure lowered its hand and the shimmer faded. The traveler understood, without needing words, that the meadow had welcomed many, that its purpose was not to demand anything, but to offer something steady, a place where the mind could put down its load, if only for a little while. The traveler took a slow breath and felt their body grow heavier in the nicest way. The figure tilted its head as if listening to something deeper than sound. Then it raised one finger and pointed gently toward the grasses beyond the stone circle. The traveler followed the gesture. In the moonlit meadow, among the swaying stems, small lights began to appear. Not harsh, not bright, soft points of glow like fireflies, but calmer, steady rather than blinking. The lights drifted closer until they formed a slow-moving path, like a trail of floating lanterns. The figure stood and lifted its cup, finishing the last sip. It set the cup down, then made a small inviting motion, as if to say, "If you wish." The traveler rose, feeling the warmth of tea still in their chest, feeling the meadows quiet around them like a cloak. They stepped out of the stone circle and followed the floating lights into the grass. The path led them away from the center, deeper into the meadow, where the grasses grew taller and the wildflowers became fewer, replaced by clusters of soft, pale mushrooms that glowed faintly at their edges. The traveler's feet moved carefully, but the ground felt friendly, springy with moss and earth. The air smelled of night-blooming flowers now, richer and sweeter than before. The figure walked beside the traveler, silent as mist. Occasionally, as the traveler's mind began to wander, a little too awake again, the figure would lift a hand and tap lightly at the air, and a nearby glow would drift closer, reminding the traveler's attention to rest on something simple: a light, a leaf, the sound of the breeze. The path curved and dipped, and soon the traveler heard a new sound, a gentle chime like glass touched softly by a spoon. They emerged into a small clearing within the meadow, where the grasses parted to reveal a shallow pond. The pond was round and still, reflecting the night sky so perfectly it looked like a second sky resting on the ground. Stars shone in it. The faint wash of the Milky Way shimmered like a spilled ribbon of light. Around the pond grew reeds and water flowers, and among them small stones were arranged in a spiral that wound toward the water's edge. The traveler approached the pond and looked down. For a moment, they saw only stars. Then, beneath the reflection, they noticed the water itself was clear enough to show pale stones at the bottom and the slow drifting of something like petals. The traveler knelt at the edge and dipped their fingertips into the pond. The water was cool, and the surface rippled outward. The stars in the reflection trembled, then settled again. The figure sat on the grass nearby and watched. Cloak pooled around it like a small patch of twilight. The traveler breathed in, and the scent of the pond was clean and fresh, carrying the faint mineral smell of stones and the sweet green hint of wet leaves. The traveler looked back toward the meadow's center, toward the circle of stones, but it was hidden now by tall grass and gentle darkness. It felt far away, not because of distance, but because the traveler had stepped into an even quieter place. A thought came, simple and unforced. It is safe to rest. The figure lifted its hand and with a slow motion traced the spiral pattern of stones around the pond. As it did, the small lights along the path drifted closer to the water and hovered above it. The pond began to glow, subtly from within, as if moonlight had seeped into it and decided to stay. In that glow, the traveler saw something new beneath the surface. Tea leaves, not many, just a few, drifting gently in the water like small green boats. The traveler blinked and the leaves remained. They looked at the figure. The figure's face was still soft and indistinct, but the traveler could feel its warmth, an old quiet kindness that asked for nothing. The traveler understood, again without words, that this pond was part of the same ritual, that green tea was not only something to drink, but also a symbol here, a way of turning attention into comfort, a way of inviting the body and mind to soften. The traveler watched the leaves in the water. They drifted in slow circles, carried by currents too gentle to feel. The motion was hypnotic, like watching clouds rearrange themselves. The traveler's breathing slowed further, matching the leaves' unhurried drift. In the pond's surface, the traveler saw their own reflection, but it looked calmer than expected. The face staring back seemed to belong to someone who had remembered how to be quiet. The figure leaned forward and lifted a small pebble from the ground. It held the pebble between thumb and finger, then dropped it into the pond. The pebble made a soft plunk. Ripples spread outward. As the ripples expanded, they seemed to carry something with them, not sound, not words, but a feeling of release, like the pond was gently shaking loose the day's leftovers. The traveler felt their shoulders relax even more. The figure dropped a second pebble, then a third, spacing them out, never rushing. Each pebble made a small ripple, and each ripple seemed to smooth the traveler's thoughts. In the quiet, the traveler began to notice the texture of the night, the way the air cooled slightly as the moon rose higher, the way a distant owl called once, then fell silent again, the way the reeds near the pond rustled like soft paper. The traveler's mind, which had been full of lists and worries earlier, began to empty itself naturally, not forcefully, not with effort, simply by turning its attention to things that did not demand anything. The figure stood and offered its hand, not touching, but close enough that the traveler could choose to follow. The traveler rose and followed again, stepping away from the pond, back into the grasses. This time the path of lights led toward a gentle hill. As they walked, the traveler noticed tiny details. Dew collecting on blades of grass like beads of glass. A spider web strung between two stems catching moonlight. A cluster of clover leaves, each one shaped like a small green heart. The hill was not steep. It rose like a slow breath. And at the top, a tree stood alone. It was an old tree with a wide trunk and branches that spread out like open arms. Its leaves were dark and glossy, and they made a soft, murmuring sound as the breeze moved through them. At the base of the tree was a simple blanket made of woven grass and soft moss, laid out as neatly as if someone had prepared it. Beside it sat a small cushion, and next to the cushion, another cup of green tea, still warm, still steaming faintly. The traveler felt a gentle amazement, but even that emotion came without sharpness. It was wonder softened by sleepiness. The figure sat beneath the tree, folding its cloak around itself. The traveler sat on the blanket, then lifted the cup. The tea smelled even more soothing up here. The air was cooler, and the steam rose visibly, curling and drifting like a pale ribbon. The traveler sipped. The warmth spread again, deeper now like a slow tide moving through the body. Up on the hill, the meadow looked different. The grasses below were like a dark green sea. The pond was a faint oval of reflected starlight. The circle of stones was hidden, but the traveler could feel its presence, like a hearth remembered. The traveler leaned back slightly, resting against the tree's trunk. The bark was textured and solid, grounding. The tree felt like something that had stood through countless nights, quietly watching the world become calm and then bright again. The figure lifted its own cup. Where had it come from? And drank, then set it aside. A long silence followed. In that silence, the traveler's eyelids grew heavier. Thoughts became softer, like voices in another room. The figure raised a hand and pointed up into the branches. The traveler looked. Among the leaves, small lantern-like shapes hung, though they were not lanterns made by hands. They were seed pods, round and pale, each one glowing faintly from within, as if it held a tiny captured star. They swayed gently, and with each sway, they released a subtle scent, green and sweet, like tea leaves warmed in the sun. The traveler inhaled, and the scent felt like comfort. The figure's cloak shifted as it moved closer to the traveler, not touching, just sharing warmth. Then in a voice that was more like wind than speech, the figure offered a simple phrase, slow and soft, as if spoken directly into the quiet of the meadow. The traveler did not need to remember the words later. They were not instructions, not a lesson. They were simply a kindness. The phrase drifted into the traveler's mind and settled there like a feather. The traveler's breathing deepened. In the distance beyond the meadow, there might have been roads, houses, busy lives, but none of that mattered here. The meadow held the traveler gently, as if saying, "For now, You are not required to do anything. The traveler's body grew heavier against the tree. A cup of tea was set down carefully on the grass. The figure watched the traveler with quiet attention, like a guardian of restful places. The seed pods swayed overhead, glowing softly. The meadow below moved in slow waves, and the sky, so wide, so patient, held its stars like calm thoughts. The traveler's mind drifted toward images that did not demand effort. A green hillside, a warm cup, the soft hush of grass, the feeling of being safe, the feeling of being held by night. The figure lifted its hand once more, tracing a slow circle in the air. The lights in the meadow below dimmed slightly, as if the world itself was turning down its brightness in respect of sleep. The traveler's eyelids closed fully now. Breath in, breath out. The tree's trunk supported them. The meadow's air cooled their skin. The lingering warmth of green tea softened their chest and belly. Even their thoughts seemed to sip something warm and gentle, then settle. The night began to deepen. The seed pods overhead glowed more faintly, like embers settling in a hearth. The breeze slowed, and the leaves murmuring became quieter, almost still. The figure remained beneath the tree, calm and unhurried, as if it could sit through 1,000 nights without ever growing restless. Down in the meadow, the pond reflected fewer ripples, becoming a smooth mirror again. The grasses leaned closer to the earth, as if preparing for their own sleep. The traveler's breathing became slower, steadier. In the quiet, the body found its own comfort. Muscles released, the forehead smoothed, the hands relaxed in their resting place. The traveler's mind wandered briefly, then returned, then wandered again, each time traveling a shorter distance, like a boat drifting toward shore. The scent of green tea lingered in the air, faint and clean, like a gentle reminder that comfort can be simple. The figure's presence was steady, not demanding attention, only offering it, like moonlight that does not ask to be seen, yet comforts the world anyway. The meadow held everything in a soft hush. The traveler sank deeper into rest, as if the earth itself were a mattress made of moss and warmth, as if the tree's roots carried calm upward, into the trunk, into the blanket, into the traveler's body. The sky above was wide and dark and peaceful. Stars shimmered quietly, like tiny lanterns in a distant village where everyone has already gone to bed. And the traveler, warmed by tea and night air, let go more and more, until there was only breathing and softness and sleep. Good night, dear traveler. Sleep well.